Welcome to Jenny Eats the World. My name is Jenny, and I'm here to rock your world. Spinning around on my peace fingers, throw it up for a 3-point shot with 2 seconds left in the game. Swish, nothing but nets. That is how you win a national championship, baby. So, as someone who is an athlete but not a claimed sports fan, I became one this weekend when the New York Knicks won the national championship. And I'm here to tell you about not just the world of sports, but the good, the bad, the dark, the ugly, why I think they're necessary, and why I think that sometimes they fall to a lethal demise. Now, before we get started, I want to just qualify myself as an athlete. I swam Division 1 for 3 years in college, and right now I am training for the New York City Marathon. And I want to share with you what happens when someone puts themselves in an athletic mindset, because the results are not just simply physical and having sculpted muscles, but what you do when you train will slip out to every facet of your life, ultimately making you a more strong and mentally resilient person than when you were watching TV every night after work. So, let's start from the beginning. My parents met playing co-ed softball. So if sports didn't exist, neither would I. Myself and my younger brother were very inclined to athletics. In fact, in our household, it was more important that we win our games than to get A's in school. Now, don't get me wrong, getting good grades was kind of a default. Like, we were just expected to get A's, maybe some B's. There wasn't really much talk when things fell below that level. But when it came to our sports, we would be diagnosing every single flip turn, every single hit, every single catch that happened during the innings and the meets and the tournaments that my brother and I played weekend after weekend, summer after summer. Needless to say, sports were not just so important for us, they were our world. It's how we traveled, it's how we bonded, it's what we talked about at dinner. But this also became a little convoluted when it came to parenting styles, because my dad was the coach for both my brother's baseball team and at times my softball team. And that created a weird schism between parent and coach. And I'm going to spare you a lot of details just to protect my father, but he did his best to shape my brother and I to be our best. The only thing that I wish he could have done a little bit differently is realizing that we didn't need a coach. We needed a dad. However, coaches are very important authority figures in our life. I still work with coaches every single week. And I encourage you to do so too, because what happens when you agree to work with someone to get you to a place that makes you a better person than when you started, you are setting yourself up for a potentially monumental shift in your life. So let's back up a little bit. I know that for me, being a competitive athlete as a kid taught me the hard lessons in life, that not everything is fair, that you could have the ball all freaking game, but all that matters is whoever has the most points when that clock hits the buzzer. Now, what I loved about being a swimmer is that it is purely objective, right? Gymnastics, diving, you're being judged. But with swimming, whoever touches the ball first is the winner. And on the flip side of that is that some meets have qualifying times for people to swim. So you're always moving region to region to realize that there are so many more swimmers out there that are so much faster than you. And so somewhere in my competitive career, I realized that it's okay if I am not the best, as long as I do my best. And that sentiment is something that I still carry with me today. Speaking of this podcast, right? Every time I show up and hit record, I am practicing sharing my voice, sharing my story, sharing my truth. Does that mean that every podcast that I produce is going to be better than the last? Absolutely not. That's part of the process. Same goes with a swim meet. Every time you show up to the block, you are not going to hit the same time. That's what's kind of cool about swimming too, is how much you can deviate from your best times depending on where you are in that season. So not only did swimming teach me about the hard facts in life, like not everything is fair, it also taught me how to show up regardless of how I was feeling. Because in my competitive swim team, you are not allowed to skip practice. You are not allowed to be late. You are not allowed to complain. Like, we just showed up, became our weird teenage selves, created a lot of hell for our coaches, but ultimately, when it was time to get in the water, we listened, we put our head down, and we started swimming. And because we went through so much agony, so much pain together, we created such a strong bond that even my swim friends today, I might not have talked to them in 10 years, but if they're in New York City, I'm always down to hang out because of what that team bond created when I was a young lad swimming in the Midwest. Now, when it came to college, I went into Xavier University with a lot of confidence because even though I was about to move a couple states away from my humble abode in Kansas, I knew that I was going to have instant friends when I joined the swim team. I knew I was going to have an instant community of people that were going to support me no matter what. And I also knew that I was going to get a lot of swag because something about sports really does create an identity of who you are. You're a jock, you're a soccer player, you're a swimmer, you're an athlete, right? And we want to make that claim known by putting our names on the back of our shirts to let you know who we are. Now, I was the only person in my high school to go to Xavier University. I was leaving behind all my friends in the Midwest, and yet I knew I was going to land into an already existing support system. And that's a wonderful thing when you're a young adult. And you can see this span out as an adult with run clubs and pickup soccer games that some cities might offer, which is actually 10 times better than being a college athlete because nothing's on the line, right? This identity complex of being an athlete can become really confusing when you start to burn out or realize that the rush that you got from the win when you were 15 is simply not there anymore. Because sports, like anything else in life, is going to take a lot of commitment. It's going to take a lot of perseverance. It's going to take a lot of drama when it comes to the other people in your cohort. Sports are a wonderful way to have instant community, but we also have to look at the ways that it alters our identity. Because when I was 20 years old and so burnt out from swimming, the only reason I kept in it was A, because it burned calories, and B, is because I truly didn't know who I was when I was out of the pool. And I think it's a very important distinction to make when you are getting really deep into your athletics of asking yourself, what would happen if I got injured tomorrow? How would I still see myself as valuable if I'm no longer a competitive athlete? And ask yourself, who in my life would still love me even if I wasn't so inclined to win? Because I think it's important when we set athletic goals to realize that it's not about the end result, but the journey of getting there. I have a friend who has run many, many marathons and giving me a little bit of insight as I train for my first, and that the joy is not from the marathon itself. It's finishing and knowing that you have put in hundreds of miles and hours for months at a time preparing for this very moment in your life. In a world where we're so addicted to instant gratification, I think more adults could set athletic goals in their life, not just to, again, shape up their body or get a gold medal, but to train for something for the sake of putting yourself through a threshold week after week, month after month. I firmly believe that those who are exercising regularly have a better temperament in all facets of their life. If you are physically strong, you're more likely to be mentally strong because every time that you show up and do your training, you're doing it regardless of how you feel. And anyone who wants to be a leader or be self sufficient needs to show up and be the big person regardless of how they feel. Now, I had someone in my life recently that showed up to a Zoom meeting and instantly started complaining and bitching about something that was her fault. And I just wondered, how would I have handled this differently if I was the leader in this situation? I would have checked myself before opening up the Zoom meeting, taken a deep breath, and put all my bullshit aside. Because as an athlete, that's sometimes what you got to do. You got to leave everything at the door and then show up to train, regardless of how you feel. That doesn't mean it's okay to suppress your feelings. I'm saying that sometimes we just have to buckle up, put on that jock strap, and get prepared to get kneed in the nuts. Because that's life, baby. And too many of us are so afraid to even step outside. That's why we hide online. It's becoming very apparent to me that there's a whole world of people who don't connect IRL. And similarly, when it comes to sports, some of these subreddits are kind of like NFL franchises. People become so obsessed with something outside of them that they forget that they are actually their own sovereign being. I am from Kansas City, and when I lived in Kansas City, you would be ridiculed if you did not wear red on game Sundays, as if I was obligated as a Kansas Citian to then also be a Chiefs fan, which is just such a big ask. Now, in New York, things are a little bit different because people have hobbies. But in the Midwest, everyone's hobby is getting wasted on Sunday morning, tailgating or watching the game from their home, making hot dogs and getting drunk with their friends. And that's not very fair to say because that's not everyone, but that's a lot of us. And I know two people for a fact that get so emotionally invested in the game that when the team inevitably loses, they lose their shit and are depressed for weeks. And I just want to ask you, is it worth it? Is it worth your entire mood and emotional state to be swayed by the result of another man kicking a ball? Ask yourself, what is it about a game that's so emotionally arousing? Because when we watch a movie or we listen to a song, there is something that happens viscerally in our body that can sway us into a different mood because that art piece is offering an expression from the artist. But when it comes to sports, it's points and games and winners and losers. Maybe it's not fair to compare art with sports because art will hopefully make you think. But sports will just make you think about the replay over and over and over again. Sure, you might be able to see a replay go in slow mo and be like, whoa, I wonder where I fumbled in my life. That's great. That's wonderful. I hope you have more of these reflections the next time you go to see a football game. But I just don't see that happening. What I see happening is a bunch of grown men who are crying for the first time in weeks watching another man kick a ball. Think about it. How many men in your life are very shut down by their emotions, but when it comes to football, you see the whole spectrum of facial expressions. And it's just really obvious that if you become so distraught by a team, aka something that's totally outside of your control, then you are basically saying that you feel like you don't have much agency in your life. Let me repeat myself. There are many men who do not tap into their emotions unless they are watching a game. Meaning, sports are the only way that they are publicly allowed to express their anger, their hurt, their pain, their resentment, and project it onto a bunch of dudes throwing balls. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that we need to have more emotional outlets, men. We need to be able to express ourselves in more safe spaces than stadiums that are providing an ample amount of beer. So, just to double down on my point, I'm going to offer a couple unfortunate statistics based on the mob mentality that ensued after a sporting game. The first is what was named the Hillsborough disaster that happened in England 1989. 97 people died and nearly 800 were injured. 1985 in Belgium, the Heysel Stadium disaster, 39 people died, approximately 600 injured. More recently, in Indonesia, at least 125 people died after a football match, becoming one of the deadliest stadium disasters ever recorded. Now, you guys, I have a theory that sports happened because we realized that the whole gladiator thing was just not gonna cut it. Think about it. Men have been fighting men for years. War is the inevitable ugliness that happens when two people can't communicate. If one tribe meets another tribe and they don't know what they're saying, they're gonna start to fight. Now, please take what I just said and go a little bit deeper in that when two people can't communicate, they're inevitably gonna fight. I think sports also came out of boredom and wanting to create something out of nothing. How many centuries of humanity happened before the cell phone? So before we could just scroll when we got irritated, bored, or nervous, we would create a game out of something. We would pack a card deck whenever we would go traveling because when the downtime happened, it was nice to create something lighthearted out of free time, right? Now, we can't talk about the tragedies of sports without talking about the substance that causes them. So, in one study looking at alcohol arrests and sporting events in college football, found that an average of 70 arrests happen on college Saturday game days versus the 12 arrests that are happening the rest of the week. Meaning that something in the air creates such a chaos, conjuring up this wild behavior that turns into arrests. More recently, there's an examination of professional sports saying that NFL games averaged around 6.6 arrests per game in one study sample. Is it worth the hundreds of dollars for the ticket and the hundreds of dollars for the keg so you can do a stand upside down and impress all your friends just so that in 3 hours later you're going to do something stupid that you will regret for the rest of your life? No, no. Just be cool, guys. Just be cool. It's just a sport. It's not that deep. So don't go so deep in the bottle, please. And lastly, I wanted to bring up someone that I really adore and find extremely intelligent and well written, and that is the linguist Amanda Montell, who is the author of Cultish and the host of Sounds Like a Cult. I encourage you to listen to her episode on the NFL, but I will briefly summarize it here. She basically says in her episode that NFL fandom contains many behaviors we associate with culty groups, that being uniforms, jerseys, having this group identity, group chants, some of which, like the Chiefs, are not always culturally appropriate. These ritual gatherings, at least in Kansas City, people love to tailgate, right? They get the food ready, they get the drinks ready, they put the face paint on, all to watch another man kick a ball. There's this tribal identity, right? What I loved so much about this weekend is that yesterday, the day after the Knicks won, anyone who was still in Knicks gear would be getting and giving high fives to other people in Knicks gear. So I'm not saying this is all bad. I'm just saying what it is. Another thing that Amanda talks about in her episode is the alcohol fueled communal experiences. I mean, think about it. How many college kids would say that they got drunk was during a basketball game? I know I'm guilty of that. I didn't care about the sports, but I didn't know that there were always going to be great parties when a game was on. So count me in, because I'm 21 and I'm looking for some fun. Last 2 points that I want to make from Amanda's episode is that there is a strong dynamic between the ins and the outs, the winners and the losers, the blue team and the red team. It's just such a hard line that people even have flags that they wave in their suburban homes that say a home split apart with a Missouri Tiger on one side and a Kansas Jayhawk on the other. And I want to ask them, you're not going to college anymore, so why are you so obsessed with something you did 30 years ago? That's another thing I'm just so confused. It's like, why are people so obsessed with their alma mater? Maybe it's just because my alma mater is pretty small. We didn't have a football team. I don't know. I've moved on with my life. I live in New York. I travel. I go to Broadway shows. I have a lot of projects that I'm on. I don't really have time to think about how Xavier's doing in the NCAA championship this year. You know what I mean? And lastly, good or bad, there is such a loyalty that people feel with their identified team. It gets so visceral that these fanatics take the loss as if they were the one who endured 3 hours of physical pain so that you could yell at a screen when they didn't win. Think about the players. They are literally risking their lives for your entertainment. Which leads me to talk about the armchair expert. We all have one of these in our family. It's usually the uncle, maybe the nephew, or your 75-year-old dad. But it's the people who think they know more than the coach and yell at the screen to talk about what play should be put into play, regardless that these ideas will never be properly communicated. It just blows my mind how much people are talking to their TV, thinking that their advice is going to be received. You are not going to persuade the referee from your living room, my friends. So just zip it, put it away, and I don't know, tell your wife that she looks lovely today. Because she could hear that a little bit more often, okay? Now, it'd be rude of me if I just ended the episode here bashing on a bunch of men who go absolutely apeshit when it comes to watching other men. And if you're watching me, you can tell by the shadows that this part right now has been edited in because I almost forgot to mention the impetus of this entire episode. And that I was fortunate enough to be in downtown Manhattan when the New York City Knicks won their first national NBA championship in, I don't know, was it ever or God knows how many years? I mean, God does know because I was watching some of these points near the end of the game and the Angels were speaking through the numbers. Like at one point, New York had 92, San Antonio had 90, and there was 8.8 seconds on the clock when there was a timeout. I was like, clearly God is watching and wants New York to win. So, with everything that can go wrong in a crowd during a game, there's nothing so palpable as the electricity in the air when an entire city is on the same wavelength watching their team. My friends kept mentioning how quiet and focused the entire city got because everyone was outside on the streets watching from the blessed people who brought their generators and projectors and whatever other routers were necessary to keep the Wi-Fi strong while they streamed the game for thousands of New Yorkers to watch in unison. It was really freaking cool, and I'm really, really grateful to be able to say that I was in New York City when they won the 2026 NBA National Championship. So for now, I am a Knicks fan. Call me a fair weather. That is totally fine. I will own it. I will own it. But what I won't do is get emotionally entangled by the Knicks in the next season until the final game, because that's the important part, right? Okay, no, 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 no. I can sound impartial to sports, but I am so grateful. I'm so grateful to identify as an athlete because not only has it shaped me physically, it has created so much vigor and determination in my essence that even when I know I'm not qualified for something or that I'm inexperienced in starting a new project, I at least have the wherewithal to try to see it through. I'll do whatever it takes for me to finish and complete a project because of what I've learned through athletics. Because sports don't care if you come from a rich family. Sports don't care if you're popular. Sports don't care if you're pretty or if you can make a really killer chili on Sunday nights. Sports are objective, well, for the most part, of whoever is performing the best in that moment. Not all across time, not all throughout the season, but in that moment. And when an athlete is in the zone, in the flow, they're truly tapping into an essence that is greater than them. Look at some of these replay shots of the national championship with the Knicks and the Spurs. There's some shots of the ball going in the net that only can be explained as divine intervention. But there is something truly magical when an athlete's in that zone, and I like to explain it as pure presence. Now, you don't get to that place by showing up once or twice. You get to that place by showing up every day. Whether you consider yourself athletic, whether you care about sports at all, I want you to ask yourself, where in your life are you not showing up and could so differently? Because if there's something that you care about, then you're going to be around it every single day. You're going to nourish it, you're going to foster it, you're going to want to see it evolve. Whether it's starting to train for a marathon and seeing your pace decrease week after week as you increase the mileage and seeing how far you can go, or if it's as simple as redoing your garage. You're not going to be able to completely gut it and renovate it in just one weekend. You're going to have to plan. You're going to have to take some steps. You're going to have to accidentally hammer your thumb and cry a bit. But if you don't show up with the same motivation day after day, then you're just going to have an incomplete garage of which your neighbors are going to complain to the HOA. So I challenge you, look at your projects in your life right now, or look at some of the goals that you have set or have been meaning to set, meaning it's an idea, right? How can you take that idea, take that project, take that goal, write it down, and then work backwards on how you're going to achieve it? And then create a plan on how you are going to execute it, meaning you are going to show up week after week, day after day, practicing that gift that you have been given. Whether it's practicing the guitar, whether it's training for a marathon, whether it's just getting dates. I mean, there's so many people out there that are so painfully alone that just practicing talking to someone is something that you're going to have to work a little hard to get used to. But in time, you do improve. You do sharpen and strengthen and sculpt. You may not ever perfect, but that's not the point. The point is to see what you're capable of and to prove yourself right. That when you set a goal and you take the time day after day to achieve that goal, and you realize that anything is possible. Let me know if you're an athlete, what you've learned from your sport, and let me know how you feel about this conversation. It might be jarring and annoying to some, but I hope that it left you with some ideas of how you're going to improve and train for whatever you're working on in today. My name is Jennifer Martin. You can call me Jenny. I was a Division I athlete at one point, and now I'm just some girl who records podcasts in her convent. Be careful in the comments because Jesus is listening. Until next time, have a beautiful day, and if you haven't already, go outside and tell a stranger that they matter.